Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 8 preview for the Pacific. It's felt like a long time since I've done a proper intro like that. It is Week 8 in the Overwatch League. We have not seen any action since Week 5. Both Week 6 and Week 7 got cancelled. But now we are in for a blockbuster week, providing it goes ahead. I'm hoping there are no announcements in the next few days, Overwatch League. Please say that everything has worked out. So, as requested by you, the viewers, I am going to divide this up into two videos, an Atlantic and a Pacific preview. Today will be the Pacific preview, looking at all of the matches in that division, and then tomorrow we will take a look at all of the games that are going to go on in the Atlantic division, because there are no interdivisional matches right now. We are not anticipating that until the second half of the season because of the logistical issues. Although, caveat to that, I have heard that the London Spitfire have moved their entire team to Korea. So, yeah, that opens the possibility for London Spitfire to be able to play the people like the Chengdu Hunters and the Hangzhou Spark and the Shanghai Dragons and the Guangzhou Charge. But I don't know necessarily why London have done that. I don't know where they were situated before. Well, they were supposedly situated on one of the coasts in America. Doing that, they're going to have pretty high ping playing the American teams if they are still in America, but who knows what's going on there. I don't know where every team is situated right now of this exact moment, but I know for a fact London are in Korea. So, moving on to the Pacific teams then, because London is not a Pacific team if we haven't noticed. Let's look at the matches we are going to see. We are going to see these Pacific teams either for the first time since week 1 or for the first time this season, which is fantastic, don't you think? And to go on about the meta preview didn't go up this week because it is exactly the same as the Week 7 meta preview, which did go up before the cancellation of Week 7. So, I encourage you to take a look at that video if you want to know about the meta. But, long story short, Sombra, Soldier 76, Winston and Lucio are banned, so we're unlikely to see Dive. We're probably going to see a lot of Bunker or Reinhardt play, basically. So, moving into the fixtures then. And these fixtures are going to be at weird times, especially for me, because the Pacific fixtures are just like that now with where they are situated. So, we start off on Saturday, March the 28th at 8 AM GMT with the Guangzhou Charge taking on the Shanghai Dragons. So, it's very difficult to predict these two first games, purely because we have not seen these teams in action competitively this season. The last time I saw these two teams in action, and the next two teams as well, was in the Shanghai Invitational in pre-season. And this is when Shanghai Dragons looked really good and the Guangzhou Charge and the Hangzhou Spark looked like second rate compared to Chengdu and Shanghai. But again, that was pre-season. We don't know what to take from that. But the Shanghai Dragons are massively improved this season in terms of their roster. They've brought in some really, really good quality like Li Zhegon, Void, Fletter. So there is a lot of potential for the Shanghai Dragons team to do very well this season. So the Guangzhou Charge, yes, they have made improvements in the off-season, but I'm not sure they've got the quality to match the Shanghai Dragons right now. But that's on paper. We really don't know what's going to happen here, remember. It's on an online format, there's no home advantage, so it would have been interesting to see Shanghai, because I believe they were the first Chinese homestand in week 2, but it's going to be interesting to see where these teams land, but I'm going to go for a Shanghai Dragons win for this first match coming out from China. So, at 10 AM, we will see the Chengdu Hunters take on the Hangzhou Spark. Now, this is much more difficult to call. Chengdu Hunters look improved, but remember, Chengdu Hunters is most of the Chinese national team that does very well at the World Cup, but in the Overwatch League, they tend to come out a little bit short. They're more of a mid-table team. But remember that the Chengdu Hunters don't always stick to that meta, do they? So we don't know what comes out from the Hunters. Hangzhou Spark, though, they were our 4th placed team last season. So they should be pretty good coming into this campaign. My only worry about the Spark, and I said this at the start of the season, is perhaps becoming a bit stale, being left behind by teams that have improved around them. Seoul Dynasty are an example of this. Shanghai Dragons also as well. So this could be quite a close matchup, but I would, in these early days, back the Hangzhou Spark to come out on top. So, let's move back over to the American teams then. And on Sunday, March the 29th at 3 AM in the morning GMT, I'm looking forward to that one. San Francisco Shock will take on the Los Angeles Gladiators. So, this should be interesting, because the last time we saw the Gladiators in action, they took on the Vancouver Titans. I'm not including the friendlies that happened last week here. And they took the Vancouver Titans in Dallas in week 1. Very, very close, with the Titans coming out with a 3-2 win. The San Francisco Shock looked like they were relying much more on individual players against the Dallas Fuel to get that win, but I would still back the Shock to get a narrow victory over the Gladiators, but I think the Gladiators are much improved, with Birdring really turning up in that first week in the lineup as well. So I think this will be a close match, but I think the Shock should be able to come out on top. Moving on, and at 5 AM we have the Seoul Dynasty take on the Dallas Fuel. Now, this fixture has a lot of history going all the way back to the Apex days, when it used to be Lunatic High taking on Envious. So, it's not quite like that these days, is it? More of a middle of the league, bottom half of the league clash, isn't it? And Seoul Dynasty, kind of on the paper, right now, look like the better team compared to Dallas Fuel. Now, we've only seen the Seoul Dynasty once this year, and that was in the friendly last week against the Shock, where they got pasted. Let's be honest. But that was the Shock. Seoul Dynasty still adjusting to having the likes of Gesture, Bedosin, Prophet, and there is a lot of potential in this Seoul Dynasty team for them to do very well. I would expect the Seoul Dynasty team to be a playoff team this season, simply because they've got that clutch. I don't want to say that clutch factor right now, because we haven't seen them too much, but they've got those players that I know can pop off, and they've got a really good coach as well in Chengun. So I think the Seoul Dynasty should be pretty good this season. Dallas Fuel, they've got a really good DPS line. But that's all they've got. I'm sorry, that's all they've got. They relied on a lot of carries in the first week in Dallas, and it still didn't get them to victories. So, losing to the Valiant as well, even though the Valiant are better than expected, this was a game that Fuel needed to win and they didn't. I wouldn't expect the Fuel to get anything out of a game against the Dynasty. Moving on then, and at 9 AM we will see the Chengdu Hunters take on the Shanghai Dragons. So, this should be a very good matchup. Shanghai should be, on paper, the best team coming out of China. Chengdu Hunters are the team that nobody can predict because basically they don't run meta. But we are in hero pools. So, who knows what Chengdu will come out with. But, expect perhaps Bull Diva? This would be the team I would expect to pull out the Bull Diva. Dive. Perhaps the only team that will run Dive for this entire week, including in the Atlantic. So, it could be really interesting to see what we get from these teams, but I would expect Shanghai Dragons to come out on top, but it could be quite a narrow victory. And at 11 AM, we will see the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Guangzhou Charge. So, Charge, they are a team that very often, in my opinion, punches above their weight. And I think they can really give this a go against the Spark. Very often, I think this will come down to how good the Spark are. I think the Charge are good, but are the Spark better? Last season, the Charge were good, but the Spark were better. I don't know whether that will carry into this season. I will back the Spark for a minute, but I am working off the paper here. I'm not working off of previous results because you can't really count the results from last season apart from maybe with the Charge because they've got a lot of their previous roster, but they've got a fairly new support line. So, yeah, I'm going to give the Spark the benefit of the doubt here. Moving on to Monday, March the 30th at 1 AM, we will see the Los Angeles Valiant take on the San Francisco Shock. So, the Valiant had actually a better week than expected in week 1 in Dallas, where they got the 3-1 win over Dallas, but they got a spanking by Vancouver in terms of the scoreline. But when you actually look at the match, they gave a good account of themselves. So I'm not too upset with the way that Valiant played in Dallas in week 1. So I think they will give the Shock a game. They will not just roll over and be slapped about. But the Shock should have the quality to see past the Valiant. If they haven't, then we start asking questions. And the only thing that might be a caveat here, and some teams have done this in previous weeks, Will the Shock concentrate a lot on that Gladiators game and take the win against the Valiant for granted? That is a possibility and may come back to bite the Shock, but it shouldn't do. The Shock should be experienced enough to not let that happen. And, well, basically have enough quality to not let that happen because they have such a big roster as well. So, moving on to 3 AM, and we have the Vancouver Titans taking on the Dallas Fuel. Rip Dallas, that's all I can say. Vancouver Titans, they looked good with Fisher in the lineup in week 1. They looked like they had the qualities that Titans had last season. I'm not sure whether the Titans are our top team. I couldn't say that, even though the standings right now, I believe, will tell you differently. But I think they are a team that will quite handily see off the likes of the Dallas Fuel. Put it that way. I don't think the Fuel have the quality in depth to compete with the Titans. Their DPS line, yeah, I think perhaps could compete with the Dallas Fuel, with the Titans. But everything else, no way. So, moving on to 5 AM, and we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. All this has the possibility of being the closest match for the entire weekend in the Pacific Division. Because, honestly, the Gladiators looked good in the opening weekend, but the Seoul Dynasty have the potential to match the Gladiators. So this could be a 5-mapper, if not more. Remember the potential to go to a crazy amount of maps. Remember that Boston-Houston game. That won't be what happens here. This will be a good Overwatch, I would have thought. But I think the Gladiators will have enough to see off the Seoul Dynasty here and get a win on the board this weekend, because their earlier match is very complicated. But obviously, the Seoul Dynasty have the favour of the fixture schedule, because Gladiators have got to play the Shock. There's going to be a lot of resources that go into that. Seoul Dynasty, before they play the Gladiators, are going to have to play Dallas Fuel. So, you know, they've got a bit of an easier ride compared to the Gladiators. It's a fairly tough week for the Gladiators, actually, but I still think the Gladiators should be able to pull through on this one. So, that is it for the Pacific preview of this week. Yes, I had to go through 9 fixtures. That's the most I've done in Overwatch League around a Roundup preview week 4. So, that should be interesting. Tomorrow, we will take a look at what's going to happen in the Atlantic for this week. Again, should be really interesting. We got the Battle of Europe, of Paris and London. We got New York versus Atlanta. That should be really interesting. And then we got a bunch of other games that will probably be fairly one-sided, like Atlanta, Florida, and New York, Boston. But we will see what happens, obviously. But it's great to be able to talk about these teams, talk about the Hangzhou Spark, talk about Shanghai Dragons, talk about all these teams we haven't talked about for a very long time. So, I'm going to leave it here for this one, and I pray to God these go ahead, because otherwise this was a whole wasted video. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.